Welcome to Some Joyful Noises, a music podcast with no rhyme, rhythm, or reason. This show is a proud member of the Anazao Podcasts Network. The reason we do this show is for community, not because any of us are music experts, but rather because we believe that music helps shape community, and that's something that's really important to all of us at the Anazao Podcast Network. I'm Joshua Knoll. I am the producer of this show. I say producer and not host because this show has no host. It has no schedule. It has no format. You are just as much the host as I am. If you would like to find out how you could lead your own episode of Some Joyful Noises, then listen to the end of the show for an invitation to lead your own conversation on this podcast. We hope you enjoy this show with no rhyme, no rhythm, and no reason. This is the launch week for our podcast, Some Joyful Noises. The two most important things for a successful podcast is one, reliability and consistency. And then number two is the best first foot forward that you can put. Since this show has no plan and no schedule, we're going to drop the ball on consistency. That means it's extra important that we have a good first foot forward, and we're asking for your help. There's a few things you can do that'll take less than 5 minutes and cost you absolutely nothing that can help our show put our first foot forward. So here's 5 things that will take you less than 5 minutes to do for no cost that would help us. Number 1, share the show. Find a friend, share the show with someone. Number 2, rate and review our show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Number 3, go to podchaser.com and rate and review the show there. Number 4, join our Facebook group, Some Joyful Noises. And then, of course, number 5 is just enjoy the show. Be sure to subscribe, and if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can go to the menu of our podcast to select automatic download. That'll help increase our downloads and tell the algorithms that this show's really important. All of these are also going to be down below in the description in case you forget any. Thank you all again so much, and we hope you enjoy the show. This episode is a repost of My Seminary Life by Brandon Knight. This episode is about hymns used during Lent, and specifically how the guest, Nathan Drake, is modernizing some hymns for use. We hope you enjoy this episode. A link to the original audio, as well as all of the Anazao Podcast Network, will be found below.
Hello, Nathan Drake.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good, man. How you doing today?
I'm good.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to One More Thing, a bonus podcast episode from My Seminary Life, where we go a little bit deeper into our most current conversation. And recently, we had our 1-year anniversary special episode, and my wife was on the show to talk about this season of Lent that we're going through. We talked about the readings we've been doing, just our general posture, things that we're fasting from. And today, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into this conversation on Lent by having Nathan Drake of Reawaken Hymns here to talk about their latest album, Hymns of Lent. So Nathan, thanks for being on the show to talk about the new album.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So before we get into the actual album itself, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and also what is Reawaken Hymns, because from the looks of it, you guys are a little bit more than just a group of people recording hymns. There's a lot of ministry that's going out from Reawaken Hymns.
Yeah, so Reawaken Hymns is, it's kind of the core of it now is the website, and it's ministry resources for churches and worship leaders and individuals as well. I just take. By the way, the music itself is me, so there's no team on that part. Unfortunately, I really wish there was because it's a lot of work. But
I was going to say, man, it sounds really good. So good on you for what's coming out.
Thank you. But I do work with 2 authors who write the devotionals for what we're currently doing, which is the Trinity Project. So okay. that's what Reawaken Hymns is in general. It started as a YouTube channel. Now it's a website and just a place for people to go get resources to lead hymns in their modern worship services.
Nice. I've listened to the Lent album, and one thing that I appreciate is that you guys are doing with Reawaken Hymns is you're doing with Reawaken Hymns. Said it again. That you're doing is
you can say we. There's other people involved. There always is.
Yeah. But the thing I appreciate is that I can sometimes be that proverbial old man shaking his fist at the clouds when we start singing hymns, but we only sing the versions that have, the new verse or the new chorus or the new bridge. You're really focusing on just taking the classic hymns and putting it into modern day worship music style tone without really changing too much of the actual lyrics of it.
Yeah, you could have read that straight off my website. Okay. That's exactly what see, now I'm saying you confused me. I'm going to go with we. I'm going to go with we as if there's a giant team because that sounds nice. That is exactly what we're doing. So I don't find anything necessarily wrong with like the rewritten hymns or the hymns that have added choruses and such. And I think those have a place for sure. Mm-hmm. But when I started Reawaken Hymns way back in the day, I was looking for modern versions of hymns to play at my own church. And that was all I could find was those changed ones or those ones with the added things to them. And that's fine, but that's not what I wanted. And that's kind of not what the purpose of me using them in the church was in the first place. So I was like, okay, I'll just kind of make my own. Thought other people could use them. So I put them on the internet, and then that's what happened.
That's awesome. Yeah, there are a few out there that I'm totally fine with. I think of like Chris Tomlin or even Todd Agnew's versions of Amazing Grace. But then there's a version of In Christ Alone where you have to sing, oh, and I'm just not here for it. I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah, no, I feel there's if we're going to be honest about this, your listeners won't tell anybody. It's okay. If we're going to be honest about it, like 20% of those I would probably play in church. 80% are just there. I mean, again, from a purely theological or philosophical standpoint, there's nothing wrong with them. But so often they sound like two songs smashed together. The really good ones, are the ones that sound like a full song, like Jesus Paid It All by Kristen Stanfill with that awesome bridge. Like I love that version. Yeah. Or Shane and Shane have a good chorus for Before the Throne. I don't personally like it because that song already has a chorus, so I don't know why you'd add another one. But there are good versions of that stuff. But
Nice. All right. So looking at the album now itself, so the story of how I came across this album is for the first time in history, I actually benefited from a Facebook ad. I was just scrolling Facebook about a month or two ago, and I saw an ad for this album. It's free, which is all the right words to use on an ad campaign. And so I went and I downloaded it. And I think the first thing that really caught my eye about this is, I'm not a musician. I'm not a worship leader. My brother is, but I listen to my fair share of Christian music. And it is very common in Christian music, and really even in just mainstream regular old music, it's very common to have a Christmas album. If you've been in Christian music for a long time, you might have several Christmas albums. Stephen Curtis Chapman's got like 5 or something. But to do something for Easter, and even more specifically for Lent, you don't see that very often. So what is the inspiration behind wanting to release something for Lent?
Yeah. Also, let me just say I hate making Facebook ads. So I know they annoy me too. And it's because I make them because I didn't want to make them. And then somebody who's really wise told me, they're like, you're making these products because you think they'll help people, right? I'm like, yeah. And they can't see them right now. Yeah. And they can see them with an ad. Yeah. Okay. I'll be careful, because you just want the people who need it to see it. And sometimes you got to put out ads, and however gross that is, whatever. Okay. Sorry. Back to the hymns of Lent. I had to put that disclaimer.
That's fine.
Back to hymns of Lent. Yeah, you're totally right. Christmas is like the one season where there's different songs, which is both interesting and strange. But yeah, if you came up in a maybe Catholic background or a more liturgical Protestant background, like maybe Lutheran or something, you probably got a little more used to kind of different hymns being sung during Lent too. I was not brought up either of those, so I was not used to this. But looking through these hymns, and I'm kind of going through these list of hymns to do, and I find all these ones that are very, I mean, dark. Honestly, I'm not sure a better word for it. They're very solemn. And they're not hymns that I might use all year, but they're fantastic hymns. And a lot of them were written very much specifically for the season of Lent.
Okay.
So I thought, I mean, there's no reason that we can't do these modern and we can't do these in modern services. So I started doing them. I started working on them. And now they're some of my favorite songs. I also really like minor dark songs, but that's just me being weird. So like Stricken, Smitten, and Afflicted is like, so good. The words of that hymn are amazing, and I'd never heard it before. And I'm like, why have I never heard this before? A big part of that is because it was a Lent song. A lot of modern Protestant churches kind of threw away Lent. So,
yeah, I much like you, I did not grow up practicing Lent. I was not part of like a Lutheran or a Catholic church growing up. So when I saw an album for the Lent season, I'm thinking to myself, oh, these are going to be like hymns I've never heard of before, which is definitely the case for a few of these, like Stricken, what was the one? Stricken, Smitten, and Afflicted. Like I'd never heard of that one. But then songs like Man of Sorrows and There Is a Fountain, those I did grow up singing. Yeah.
Yeah. And those are kind of the crossover ones. Like there's three on that album. So it's 5 songs. There's 3 that are very much like Lent specific. It's Stricken, Smitten, and Afflicted, O Sacred Head Now Wounded. These both completely sound like Lent songs. And He Died for Me, which I found is the least known hymn of all of them. I did a poll and that nobody knew that one, and I didn't know it before I learned it either. So those are very Lent focused. But then there's also these ones that work fantastic for Lent, but we use all year, like There's a Fountain, Man of Sorrows. Also ones like Nothing But the Blood, or Jesus Paid It All. Great Lent hymns.
Yeah, I was thinking, I guess it would be a little bit more of an Easter song, but like Christ the Lord is Risen Today would be another one that, like, I guess that's the conclusion to it all. Is
that's the big party at the end.
After you go through this season of, I always have this picture in mind for Lent, this season of wilderness, of just reflecting on the affliction of Christ, but also our own affliction as we, fast from different things to draw nearer to Him. And these songs have really helped my wife and I to kind of hit that tone, because you are right. They're darker. They're not like Christmas songs. They are, these are darker tone songs.
Yeah, definitely darker tone. And like He Died for Me and Stricken, Smitten, and probably O Sacred Head too. Those I probably wouldn't play any other time of the year. Stricken, Smitten I might, just because it's so awesome and it's so theologically dense that there's a lot going on there. But He Died for Me and O Sacred Head are so visceral and so just straight up about Christ's suffering that it's a wonderful thing to focus on during Lent, and not a bad thing to focus on the rest of the year. But we tend to go with songs that focus on that in a more grateful light, if you will, or a more celebratory light, whereas these are very much like, all right, let's just sit in the suffering for a while, which I think is kind of where, like, as me as a Protestant who didn't grow up with a Catholic or liturgical background, that's what Lent kind of is to me. It's not like a time to give up meat or anything like that. For me, it's a time to just kind of sit in that uncomfortable place that we don't often sit in, because to be honest, most of our churches have a torture device displayed in the front of your church. Like, we don't think about that, but that's exactly what happened. And so just for these 6 weeks, sometimes it's good to just say, okay, it was my sin that put Him on that cross. Yeah,
I've heard it said before, and I don't know who originally said this, but something to the effect of, as Protestants, we rush to Easter. It makes sense. Like, we want to get to the good part, but we don't leave Jesus on the cross. Like, at least in my growing up in the church, the Good Friday service was optional. That wasn't like you had to go to the Good Friday service, even though you have to have the Good Friday service in order to get to Easter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not to sound too sassy, but Good Friday service doesn't draw in the crowds. Easter does. So, I'm not trying to be mean, but in the kind of seeker culture that probably we both grew up in when we were growing up in churches, was very focused on what could bring in outside people. And Lent is not very attractive when you're talking about someone dying,
Right. Yeah. So how did you come across these songs? Did you go to Catholic hymnals and liturgical readings to find these? Like, how did you arrive at these 5 songs for the album?
So actually these 5 are actually from the full length album of Hymns of the Sun, which came out today, by the way. I'm exhausted currently. Today's the release day for Hymns of the Sun, I know. Which is part of the Trinity Project, which I bet you can guess the 3 parts of that. Hymns of the Father, Hymns of the Son, Hymns of the Spirit. Each of those are 20 hymns. Currently, we're working on Hymns of the Sun. Came out today. And as we were picking songs for Hymns of the Sun, these just kind of ended up in there. And they're songs I've done before. I'll talk about how I originally found them in a bit. But these songs ended up in there because they're about the sun. And we looked and we're like, hey, there's 5 songs in here that are like so good for Lent that we, I just want people to have these for Lent. So we put out a whole separate thing that was Hymns of Lent. Originally, most of them, There's a Fountain and Man of Sorrows I knew just, from everywhere.
Sure.
But those other 3, I think all 3 of them might have been suggested to me, honestly. Like, people would comment on my YouTube videos and say, hey, do this one, do that one. And I think all 3 of them people had suggested.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, that makes it easier. That's why
it does.
That's why people should use the comment section. That's a great way to actually use a comment section on social media to give good suggestions like that.
It is one of the few good ways.
Right. Well, man, this has been really encouraging to me today to have this short conversation with you. I've really enjoyed this album. My wife and I have listened to it. It's so short. We've listened to it almost every day because the thing that we've given up this year for Lent has been the right to choose to listen to mainstream music. When we're out in public, we can't control what's being played. But, when we're on Spotify, YouTube, listening to the radio in the car, because I'm an old man, we're choosing to listen to sacred music, worship music. And so this album has come out at a perfect time for us to keep our, to kind of put together our worship theology, shine up our worship theology a little bit of, there's even songs about the suffering of our Savior.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So if people wanted to get a hold of the album or the full length Hymns of the Sun project, where can they go to find this stuff?
Reawakenhymns.com is where everything is. And just moved Hymns of Lent somewhere, so I'll have to make sure that's still available. Oh, yeah, it's still on there if you go to free stuff on my website. Yeah. So go to reawakenhymns.com and you can find both those things.
And there's a whole bunch of stuff under that free tab, isn't it? Mostly for worship leaders, right?
Mostly for worship leaders, yeah. But there's like the Hymns of Lent, which is a devotional and such. And there's also like free worship pads and things like that.
Nice. Well, I've got one more question for you before we bail out of this episode. When I first looked you up, for whatever reason, the first hit on Google was your LinkedIn profile. I don't know why that was the first hit.
Seriously?
Yeah. And I clicked and I read it, and it had all the right proper, worship leader, reawaken hymns, blah, blah, blah. But it also mentioned that you're a pretty big geek. So I'm curious. I'm also a really big geek. So I'm curious, what geeky things are you into?
Oh, I'm amazed my LinkedIn came up. I haven't updated that one. I am in the, let's see, my realms of geekiness. Well, there are a lot. The one big one that I'm not into that most people are is video games, but I love comic books. I love Legos. I'm a bit of a Trekkie if we're going to be honest about it.
Okay.
I don't know. You could probably name anything and most things. And with board games, we have a huge board game collection.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm actually on another podcast called Systematic Geekology, and that's all that we do. We talk about geeky stuff that we love, comic books, Marvel movies, Star Wars, stuff like that, and then take any themes that come up in it and look at it from a scripture point of view. So
I'm gonna have to be on that podcast.
dude, I'll hook you up.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, hey man, I got the hookup for you. So Sweet. We'll do that.
Sweet.
Well, hey everyone, thanks for listening to this bonus episode, and make sure you go check out that album. If anything, it's free. It's good music, but it is free. So go check it out. Check out all the other resources on Reawaken Hymns. If you're new to the show, you can find My Seminary Life on any podcast platform that you get your shows usually on. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at My Seminary Life Pod. Thanks again for listening, and remember, keep on studying.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Some Joyful Noises, a proud member of the Anazao Podcast Network. You can listen to other Anazao podcasts with the link that's down below in this show's description. If you have ideas for this show or would like to lead one of these episodes, then you can email us at anazaoministriespodcast@gmail.com and pitch an idea to us, and we'll talk about it and see whether or not we can make it work for you to lead your own episode. We hope to hear from you soon, and that you'll help us keep it noisy. This is the launch week for our podcast, Some Joyful Noises. The two most important things for a successful podcast is one, reliability and consistency. And then number two is the best first foot forward that you can put. Since this show has no plan and no schedule, we're going to drop the ball on consistency. That means it's extra important that we have a good first foot forward, and we're asking for your help. There's a few things you can do that'll take less than 5 minutes and cost you absolutely nothing that can help our show put our first foot forward. So here's 5 things that will take you less than 5 minutes to do for no cost that would help us. Number 1, share the show. Find a friend, share the show with someone. Number 2, rate and review our show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Number 3, go to podchaser.com and rate and review the show there. Number 4, join our Facebook group, Some Joyful Noises. And then, of course, number 5 is just enjoy the show. Be sure to subscribe, and if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can go to the menu of our podcast to select automatic download. That'll help increase our downloads and tell the algorithms that this show's really important. All of these are also going to be down below in the description in case you forget any. Thank you all again so much, and we hope you enjoy the show.